Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, celebrations, tradition and succession controversy. The Dalai Lama's succession, a battle for control and spiritual legacy. Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, celebrations, tradition and succession controversy. The Dalai Lama's 90th birthday wasn't just a celebration, it was a defiant symbol of hope for Tibetans worldwide. But this milestone event hides a looming battle that could reshape Tibetan Buddhism forever. Undeterred by torrential monsoon rains and thick fog, thousands gathered in Dharamshala, India, on Sunday to honor the spiritual leader. Dressed in vibrant traditional attire, devotees packed narrow streets from dawn, queuing for hours outside the Tsuklakeng temple complex, many unable to enter once capacity was reached amid heavy Indian police presence. Masked dancers swirled to gongs and horns as attendants guided the Nobel laureate inside, where Hollywood supporter Richard Gere joined Indian ministers in tributes. The courtyard echoed with songs while the Dalai Lama accepted his fruit-topped birthday cake, culminating days of festivities in this Himalayan exile hub that's been his home since fleeing China's 1959 crackdown on Tibet. Attendees like New Jersey's Namgyal Dorji Gongpa, who brought his family from America, called it a momentous occasion to connect children with Tibetan roots. In his birthday message, the Dalai Lama emphasized achieving peace of mind through compassion, oddly upbeat while raising his longevity goal to 130 years during prayers. And here's where it gets explosive. His recorded announcement that his office holds sole authority over his reincarnation sets up a clash with China's atheist regime, which insists it alone can approve successors. While Tibetan attendee Tenzin Gyatso welcomed this decision as protection from China's attempts to politicize reincarnation, Beijing immediately reiterated that any successor must be approved by the central government under Chinese law. The Dalai Lama urges followers to reject any Beijing-appointed candidate, but China's growing influence has already weakened his global reach. He hasn't met a sitting U.S. president since Obama in 2016. Still, heartfelt tributes flooded in. Obama praised a simple Buddhist monk who speaks up for freedom, while PM Modi called him an enduring symbol of compassion. U.S. Secretary Marco Rubio notably backed Tibetans' right to choose religious leaders without interference. Now we ask, should a government have power over spiritual succession? Share your view. Is China's stance justified or a violation of religious freedom? The Dalai Lama's succession, a battle for control and spiritual legacy. The struggle between Buddhist rebirth and Chinese authority, the contest to determine the next Dalai Lama successor. Few events create as much excitement in the hills of Dharamshala as the Dalai Lama's birthday. This year, as monks and followers gathered in the scenic Indian town in anticipation of the Tibetan spiritual leader's 90th birthday on Sunday, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. For many years, the Dalai Lama had indicated that he would reveal significant information regarding his reincarnation around the time of his 90th birthday. At last, in a video message directed at Tibetan monks and leaders, he shared his vision for the future. This announcement came amidst concerns about a fierce competition for succession between the Tibetan community and the Chinese government, which has long sought to exert control over the Dalai Lama's institution, regarded as the highest authority in Tibetan Buddhism. Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, affirmed that he would continue in his role until his passing. Following that, in accordance with centuries-old traditions, he would be reincarnated, and only his close circle of trusted monks would possess the exclusive authority to identify his successor. This process often involves a lengthy search for a child who embodies his reborn spirit. No one else has any such authority to interfere in this matter, the Dalai Lama asserted to his monks. This declaration put an end to years of speculation that, in a bid to thwart Chinese interference, the Dalai Lama might propose an alternative method of reincarnation, such as transferring his spiritual essence to a successor while he was still alive. Many in the Tibetan diaspora were deeply concerned when he suggested that he might not reincarnate at all. The Dalai Lama's recent statement was a bold challenge to the Chinese Communist Party, which has long maintained that it alone has the right to determine the next Dalai Lama, a belief that has been codified into Chinese law. Interestingly, Tenzin Sen, an expert in Indo-Chinese relations and Buddhism, observed that the Dalai Lama's recent message was more diplomatic than some of his earlier remarks. Previously, he had indicated that the 15th Dalai Lama would be born in the free world, implying outside of China, but this time he refrained from repeating that assertion. "I interpret this as a carefully managed announcement that avoids provoking China too much," Sun remarked. The Dalai Lama is not just a spiritual leader, he is also a strategic thinker who understands the broader geopolitical dynamics, especially the tension between India and China. China's sensitivity to this issue was evident in the absence of the Dalai Lama's announcement from any Chinese or Tibetan media outlets. Robert Barnett, a scholar of Tibetan history at SOAS University of London, noted, "China's propaganda officials seem reluctant to let this news reach Tibetans or even the Chinese public. This is likely because they fear a surge of support for the Dalai Lama or are struggling to formulate a response." In 1950, China invaded and took control of the autonomous region of Tibet. Following a failed uprising by Tibetans in 1959, the Chinese government threatened to arrest the Dalai Lama, who served as both a religious and political figure, forcing him into exile in India. After a perilous journey across the Himalayas, the Dalai Lama met with then Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in April 1959. Nehru, despite facing significant opposition within his own government, declared that the Tibetan spiritual leader should be allowed to live in peace in India. Since that time, the Dalai Lama, along with other Tibetan religious leaders, civilians, and exiled parliamentarians, has established their political and spiritual headquarters in Dharamshala, nestled in the Himalayan mountains. From this base, the Dalai Lama has served as both a spiritual leader and a passionate advocate for the Tibetan cause and community over the past 66 years. He has consistently resisted China's attempts to influence the institution of the Dalai Lama or interfere in the succession process. In Greater Tibet, which is home to approximately 6 million people, Chinese authorities have implemented increasingly harsh measures and censorship to suppress the Dalai Lama's influence, including banning images of him. Beijing has labeled the Dalai Lama a wolf in monk's clothing and regards him as a dissident and separatist, despite his advocacy for greater Tibetan autonomy within China rather than complete independence. Chinese efforts to diminish his influence are widely perceived as unsuccessful. As the Dalai Lama's international stature has risen, he is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate with millions of followers, including many prominent celebrities. He remains more revered than ever. His ongoing presence poses a significant challenge to Chinese efforts to enforce uniformity in Tibet, prompting officials to become increasingly determined to control the circumstances surrounding his death. Following the Dalai Lama's announcement this week, which was only made available in English, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Mao Ning, stated that his successor must be chosen by drawing lots from a golden urn and approved by the central government. Analysts generally agree that the most likely outcome after the Dalai Lama's passing is the appointment of two successors, one identified by Tibetan monks according to tradition, likely outside of China and recognized by the Tibetan community in exile, and another selected by the Chinese Communist Party from within China. Over the years, the Dalai Lama's presence in Dharamshala and the freedom he enjoys in India have been sources of tension in Indo-Chinese relations. However, since 2020, when border tensions escalated into violent clashes, it seems that the Indian government, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has begun to view the Tibet issue as a potential leverage point against China. China has warned that any nation that interferes in the Dalai Lama's reincarnation will face sanctions, a message clearly aimed at India. In a significant departure from previous norms, India's Minister of Minority Affairs, Kiren Rijiju, who is also a Buddhist, publicly stated this week that the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is to be determined by established conventions and according to the wishes of the Dalai Lama himself. No one else has the right to make that decision but him. In response, China's foreign ministry promptly urged India to cease using Tibetan issues to meddle in China's internal affairs. Amitabh Mathur, a former advisor on Tibet to the Indian government, suggested that it is highly probable that the Dalai Lama's office had informed New Delhi in advance about the reincarnation announcement, and that Rijiju's statement was made with the approval of senior officials. This certainly goes beyond what has been previously stated by India, Mathur noted. He indicated that the geopolitical complexities surrounding the Dalai Lama are likely to intensify after his death, especially if Tibetan officials identify his reincarnation within India, countering China's own potential selection. Tibetan officials have confirmed that unofficial communication channels remain open with the Chinese, and the Dalai Lama is doing everything possible to prevent the 600-year-old Tibetan Buddhist institution from being co-opted by Chinese political interests. He approaches these matters with a very pragmatic perspective, Mather remarked. It's important to remember that the Dalai Lama is as knowledgeable in statecraft as he is in spiritual affairs. Nevertheless, as he led prayers on the eve of his birthday, the Tibetan leader, who appeared to be in good health, expressed that he does not anticipate his death in the near future. "I hope," he stated, "to live for another 30 or 40 years."